laughing so much. I'm probably peeking out my mic. Oh my goodness. Um, that can't have been because I was talking about historical contraception. It can't be. It must have just been an issue with my Wi-Fi or something. That's gotta be coincidence, surely. Um, yeah. I I don't think that Twitch is sophisticated enough to shut me down immediately. If it was actually um, censorship of this particular side of historical knowledge. Um, no, I would be surprised if it was actually banned. But yes, we should get back to the book anyway. Sorry. Um, yeah, so I think that that might have also had something to do with the idea that it was bad luck. Uh, so I'm gonna just like vamp for a little while because I know that some people, after we've stopped and started again, will have ads. Um, so I'll vamp a little bit and before I get started back with the book again. As long as we do like 30 seconds of rambling, that should be fine. Um, so yeah, I will go back to where we were before to catch up with it. So Mrs. Croft has been like, "Oh, I think that you knew my brother," and Anne's like, and then it turns out, and then Mrs. Croft's like, "Perhaps you've heard that he's married," and of course for us uh, as readers, at first we're like, "Oh no," but now we find out it's the other brother. Here's the book cover for Persuasion. I've got the folio edition, which I got for Christmas from my in-laws, and I love it. The paper, it's so smooth. Oh. Anyway, she could now answer as she ought, and was happy to feel, when Mrs. Croft's next words explained it to be Mr. Wentworth of whom she spoke, so Mr. Wentworth, not Captain Wentworth, the clergyman, that she had said nothing which might not do for either brother. She immediately felt how reasonable it was that Mrs. Croft should be thinking and speaking of Edward, and not of Frederick, and with shame at her own forgetfulness, applied herself to the knowledge of of their former neighbour's present state with proper interest. The rest was all tranquillity, till, just as they were moving, she heard the Admiral say to Mary, "We are expecting a brother of Mrs. Croft's here soon. I dare say you know him by name." He was cut short by the eager attacks of the little boys, clinging to him like an old friend and declaring that he should not go, and being too much engrossed by proposals of carrying them away in his coat pocket, etc., to have another moment for finishing or recollecting what he had begun. Anne was left to persuade herself, as well as she could, that the same brother must still be in question. She could not, however, reach such a degree of certainty as not to be anxious to hear whether anything had been said on the subject at the other house, where the Crofts had previously been calling. The folks of Great House were to spend the evening of this day at the cottage, and it being now too late in the year for such visits to be made on foot, the coach was beginning to be listened for, when the youngest Miss Musgrove walked in. That she was coming to apologise, and that they should have to spend the evening by themselves, was the first black idea, and Mary was quite ready to be affronted, when Louisa made all right by saying that she only came on foot to leave more room for the harp, which was bringing in the carriage. "And I will tell you our reason," she added, "and all about it. I am come on to give you notice that Papa and Mamma are out of spirits this evening, especially Mamma. She is thinking so much of poor Richard, and we agreed it would be best to have the harp, for it seems to amuse her more than the pianoforte. I will tell you why she is out of spirits. When the Crofts called this morning, they called here afterwards, did not they? They happened to say that her brother, Captain Wentworth, is just returned to England, or paid off or something, and is coming to see them almost directly. And most unluckily, it came into Mamma's head when they were gone that Wentworth, or something very like it, was the name of poor Richard's captain at one time. I do not know when or where, but a great while before he died, poor fellow. And upon looking over his letters and things, she found it was so, and is perfectly sure that this must be the very man, and her head is quite full of it, and of poor Richard, so we must all be as merry as we can, that she may not be dwelling upon such gloomy things. So, the relevant bit is that it is Captain Wentworth. Sorry, I have forgotten to plug in my laptop charger. Oh, thank you so much for all these gifted subs. Karen Sk, thank you so much. Johnny, could you possibly get me my charger? It's in the study. I think I can survive until it comes. Yes, so we've heard a lot about poor Richard, but it is Captain Wentworth that is coming to Kellynch. The real circumstances of this pathetic piece of family history, pathetic meaning sad, not pathetic meaning, pathetic. The real circumstances of this pathetic piece of family history were that the Musgroves had had the ill fortune of a very troublesome, hopeless son, and the good fortune to lose him before he reached his 20th year, that he had been sent to sea because he was stupid and unmanageable on shore, that he had been very little cared for at any time by his family, though quite as much as he deserved, seldom heard of, and scarcely at all regretted, when the intelligence of his death abroad had worked its way to Uppercross 2 years before. Thank you.
You're welcome.
He had, in fact, though his sisters were now doing all they could for him by calling him poor Richard, been nothing better than a thick-headed, unfeeling, unprofitable Dick Musgrove, who had never done anything to entitle himself to more than the abbreviation of his name, living or dead. This is such a drag of poor Richard. Just, wow. Who had never done anything to entitle himself to more than the abbreviation of his name, living or dead. He had been several years at sea, and had, in the course of those removals to which all midshipmen are liable, and especially such midshipmen as every captain wishes to get rid of, been 6 months on board Captain Frederick Wentworth's frigate, the Laconia, and from the Laconia he had, under the influence of his captain, written the only 2 letters which his father and mother had ever received from him during the whole of his absence. So, this is interesting to note that Frederick Wentworth is the only captain that ever made him write home. That is to say, the only 2 disinterested letters. All the rest had been mere applications for money. In each letter he had spoken well of his captain, but yet so little were they in the habit of attending to such matters, so unobservant and incurious were they as to the names of men or ships, that it had scarcely made any impression at the time, and that Mrs. Musgrove should have been suddenly struck this very day with the recollection of the name of Wentworth as connected with her son seemed one of those extraordinary bursts of mind which do sometimes occur. That's a little defence of Jane Austen, which do sometimes occur. She had gone to her letters and found it all as she supposed, and the reperusal of these letters, after so long an interval, her poor son gone for ever, and all the strength of his faults forgotten, had affected her spirits exceedingly, and thrown her into greater grief for him than she had known on first hearing of his death. Mr. Musgrove was, in a lesser degree, affected likewise, and when they reached the cottage they were evidently in want, first, of being listened to anew on this subject, and afterwards of all the relief which cheerful companions could give. To hear them talking so much of Captain Wentworth, repeating his name so often, puzzling over the past years, and at last ascertaining that it probably would, turn out to be the very same Captain Wentworth whom they recollected meeting once or twice after their coming back from Clifton, a very fine young man, but they could not say whether it was 7 or 8 years ago, was a new sort of trial to Anne's nerves. She found, however, that it was one to which she must inure herself. Since he actually was expected in the country, she must teach herself to be insensible on such points. And not only did it appear that he was expected, and speedily, but the Musgroves, in their warm gratitude for the kindness he had shown poor Dick, and very high respect for his character, stamped as it was by poor Dick's having been 6 months under his care, and mentioning him in strong, though not perfectly well spelt praise, as a fine dashing fellow, only too particular about the schoolmaster. This is in the text misspelled, fellow with one L, wrong kind of two, particular spelt wrong. A fine dashing fellow, only too particular about the schoolmaster, were bent on introducing themselves and seeking his acquaintance as soon as they could hear of his arrival. The resolution of doing so helped to form the comfort of their evening. Viola Katzen, thank you so much for subscribing for 22 months. Oh wow, was Austen splashed by a carriage containing someone called Richard when writing this? So there are a few things where Austen keeps writing things. She keeps writing certain tiny little things that's like really insulting, and Richard seems to be a name that she just has zero respect for. There's also a drag on the name Richard in Northanger Abbey. Northanger Abbey likely being the first of her novels that she wrote, and Persuasion likely being the last. For some reason, they both contain just complete drags on Richards. So, yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but something. Like, something is happening. Yes, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. We've got some Karinska gifted 3 subs. To help people who've had ads when the stream came back. Thank you, that's really nice. And 14 Carrots has given a Ko-fi and says, thank you for book club. Just to be sure, here's another reminder to save the VOD, or maybe both VODs since the stream crashed. And thank you. Yes, that's a very good point to save both the VODs. So thank you very much to everybody for joining me. We're going to be raiding Drut now. What shall our raid phrase be? I think our raid phrase shall be Unfortunate Richard. Or Poor Dick. We'll call it Poor Dick. Drut, what are you streaming now? Any moment. Well, I've already pressed the raid, so you have very, very little time to tell us. But I'm sure it will be a delight. Oh, you're not streaming. Cancel that raid. Unraid. Everybody's allowed to say Poor Dick in their real life, but there's no one to say it to for a raid. So, thank you all very much for joining me in that case. And there will be Johnny's stream on Friday. He's trying to finish Prey. And then MacGuffin will be finishing off our Pit Crawler Wizard Trial on Sunday. That's okay, Drat. You don't have to apologise. Your time is your own. And that will be where we are on the internet. And then I will see you here, I hope, next week. Cool. Thank you very much. Bye.